Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive.
Another deep dive.
Yeah. Where we like to take a whole bunch of sources and kind of pull out the most important stuff.
Yeah.
The really good insights.
Right.
And today we're going to be diving deep into the Gospels, the book of Acts.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to be drawing from this PDF here
Mm-hmm.
called The Gospels and Acts, Jesus as a Missionary.
Looking forward to it.
So what are we really trying to uncover here?
Well, I think what we really want to understand is this really core element to the Christian faith.
Okay.
And that is this idea of Jesus as a missionary, and then how his early followers continued that very mission.
Okay.
So we want to kind of uncover some of the key aspects of this whole idea of being sent.
Right, being sent.
And how it shapes these foundational texts.
And even right from the start, like what's striking to me is this whole concept of being sent. It's like so simple.
Yeah. But it's like
powerful.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it kind of like unfolds in these surprising ways, as we'll see.
Right.
So where do we first see Jesus embodying this missionary purpose? Like right in the text.
John's gospel is a really powerful place to start.
Okay.
Especially that prologue at the very beginning.
Yeah.
You know, John, he begins by introducing this concept of the word, the logos.
No.
And he presents this not as just a concept,
Right.
but as someone who was with God from the very beginning,
Right.
God's active agent in creation. You know, as John 1.3 tells us, all things were made through him.
Right.
This word is also described as this light that's shining in the darkness.
Right.
Bringing both illumination and life to humanity.
So is the initial insight here that God's intention to like connect with humanity?
I think so.
Wasn't like a later thought,
Yeah.
but something integral from like the very act of creation.
Right.
You know, it's woven right into the fabric of how the world is created.
Right.
You know, and then we see John the Baptist, you know, he comes on the scene and he directly points to Jesus.
Yeah.
Identifying him as this very word, even calling him the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
As you see this almost paradoxical situation in John's account. Jesus, as this divine word, comes to his own people, his own cultural and religious context.
Right.
And yet the majority don't receive him.
Yeah, they don't receive him.
It's wild.
It is. It's really striking.
Yeah.
You know, but John, he emphasizes that for those who do receive him, he grants them the power to become children of God.
Okay.
And this isn't limited by their ethnicity or background. He offers universal.
So this initial offer of salvation through Jesus, right from the beginning of John's gospel, it's presented as something available to everyone.
Everyone.
No matter where they're from.
It doesn't matter.
Or their background.
Background doesn't matter.
It's really striking.
It really is.
Yeah.
John is highlighting this universal God, sending his son, the universal word, as a universal savior.
For everyone.
For all of humanity.
Right.
Now, well, not everyone accepts this.
Right.
And that's a point of great sorrow in the narrative.
Yeah.
The invitation itself stands open to all, regardless of their nationality, race, language, customs. What's really fascinating here is John's strategic use of the term logos.
Tell me more about why that specific term is so significant.
Well, logos wasn't just a term within Jewish thought.
Right.
It was a concept widely discussed in the Greco-Roman world.
Gotcha.
So you have Stoic philosophers who have their own understanding of logos as this principle of reason and order in the cosmos. And similar ideas existed in other cultures and philosophical traditions.
Right.
So the brilliance here is how John kind of leverages a concept familiar to a diverse audience to present Jesus in this universally understandable way.
So he's breaking down these immediate cultural barriers for his message.
Yeah. I mean, imagine people reading this for the first time back then who would have had some understanding of logos already. And now it's being used
to describe Jesus.
So it's very strategic.
It makes John's portrayal of Jesus so much more
broadly
relevant
yeah.
from the outset.
Yeah.
That's a crucial insight. It does.
Yeah.
And then we arrive at John 1.14, a truly pivotal verse. The Word became flesh. And dwelt among us.
Yes.
Now, for Jewish readers, as the study points out, the imagery here would be so rich.
Yes, so rich.
The verb root suggests Jesus, like, pitched his tent.
Pitched his tent among us.
Right. Directly echoing the dwelling of the tabernacle among the ancient Israelites. A tangible sign of God's presence.
God's presence with his people.
So this isn't just about God making an appearance.
No.
It's about God taking up permanent residence.
Permanent residence.
In human form. Among humanity.
Yes.
Theologians use the term incarnation. To describe this. It's the profound truth that in the person of Jesus, God has drawn intimately close
to all humans.
Demonstrating his deep love
and personal concern for them.
And his personal concern.
So much so that he became fully human.
And because his son became fully human, all people are seen as precious to him.
Absolutely.
And salvation is offered through faith in Jesus.
Yes.
Okay, so the incarnation is this, like, unique and singular event centered on Jesus. But the study makes this really interesting point, that this act of God drawing near wasn't intended to end with Jesus himself.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It keeps going. What's fascinating is John makes it clear that Jesus intended for this representation of God to continue through his disciples. So by calling them, teaching them, and ultimately commissioning them, he essentially leaves them as these flesh and blood witnesses in the world to continue representing God to all humanity after his ascension.
That's huge.
It's huge.
It's as if they become extensions of that initial act of God drawing near in Jesus. It's like this ongoing thing.
It's like ripples that spread out from that initial point of contact. And the study highlights how John almost bookends Jesus' earthly ministry with this core idea of being sent. So you have the Word became flesh in John 1.14.
Right at the beginning.
Marking the beginning. And then in John 20.21, the resurrected Jesus declares, as the Father has sent me, I am sending you.
Powerful.
These verses act as a powerful frame, emphasizing the ongoing nature
of this divine mission.
So Jesus' life, death, resurrection, all need to be understood within this grand cosmic context of God's love and his enduring call to all humanity.
And that leads us directly to this concept of Jesus as God's apostle. Now, when we hear apostle, a lot of ideas from church history might come to mind. Like, what's the fundamental meaning we should focus on in this context?
The study really stresses that the term apostolos originates from the Greek verb apostolo, which simply means to send.
To send.
So at its core, an apostolos is a sent one.
A sent one.
There's even a feminine form, apostol.
Oh, wow.
Referring to the very act of being sent. The mission itself. And as we just discussed with John 20.21, Jesus explicitly uses this apostolic language to describe his own relationship with the Father as the Father has sent me.
So Jesus isn't just like someone who's sent. He fundamentally embodies
it.
The very essence of being sent by God.
Absolutely.
It's not just like a task he was given. It's like who he is.
It's part of his identity and his disciples. By being called and then commissioned by him, they become apostolic. By participating in this same role of being sent.
That makes sense.
So the study notes that when Jesus outlined his mission in his hometown synagogue in Nazareth, he quotes Isaiah, saying he was sent to preach good news to the poor, in Luke 4.19. And then, of course, we have the specific selection of the 12 apostles. Jesus deliberately chose them to send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons, as we see in Mark 3.1c. And 6.7, they were literally sent by him on a mission.
And this act of sending isn't a one-time event, is it?
No, it's not.
Even after his resurrection?
Yes. Even after.
Where do you see this idea
reiterated
and expanded?
Expanded, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Matthew 28.8, 20.
The Great Commission.
The Great Commission is a clear and powerful reaffirmation that they are now being sent into all the world.
The whole world. Not just Israel anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the study does point out that the term apostle did evolve in later church history to also denote a position of authority and official leadership within the church.
Right.
But it's vital to remember that in the New Testament, the primary and foundational idea is this core concept of being sent with a specific task.
Right.
So not necessarily a title or a position, but an active role with a defined purpose.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from a title or a position to like an active role, like a defined purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this helps us understand why someone like Paul, who wasn't one of the original 12, could also call himself an apostle.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily like in competition with the original group.
Right.
But because he was specifically given an apostleship,
a
distinct mission
to
bring obedience to the faith among all the Gentiles, as he states in Romans 1.5.
So the connection is clear. God initiates by sending Jesus.
Yes.
And Jesus, in turn, commissions and sends his disciples.
That's right.
They become apostles, and their work takes on this apostolic nature.
That's exactly right.
Right, and the study even draws a line to this later term missionary, which comes from Latin. While the specific word isn't found in the New Testament, the underlying and fundamental concept being sent to all peoples with a specific message is absolutely central to Jesus's life and ministry.
Central, yeah.
And this is why the study argues that to truly grasp who Jesus was and what he did, we must understand him.
As a missionary figure.
As a missionary figure, right. Now, the study raises a fascinating point about something that might seem contradictory on the surface. Early in his ministry, Jesus seems to primarily focus on sending his apostles to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which initially could appear somewhat limited or even ethnocentric, right? How does that initial focus reconcile with the later, much broader command of the Great Commission to go to all the world?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the study suggests that this initial, more focused mission to Israel wasn't a contradiction to the later Gentile mission, but rather a strategic progression within God's overall plan. So think of it as a direct and targeted appeal to the people of God who had been prepared through the Old Testament scriptures and covenants to embrace their messianic role in bringing salvation to the world. But when they, by and large, did not embrace that invitation in the way anticipated, Jesus then moved forward with God's broader preordained purpose by creating a new Israel, a community of faith open to all who believe in him, regardless of their ethnic or cultural background.
That makes sense.
So the crucial insight here is understanding this not as a plan B, because the first plan failed, but as the unfolding of God's universal intention in response to Israel's collective decision.
Okay, that reframing is really helpful. So it's not a shift in God's ultimate goal.
No, it's not.
But rather a change in like the primary recipients.
Yeah, the primary recipients changed.
Then the pathway to achieving that goal of reaching all peoples.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a movement from the particularity of the Old Testament promises fulfilled in Jesus to the universality of the New Testament church. Reaching out to the entire world.
And this inherent character of God, this deep desire to reach out to those who are estranged.
Absolutely.
Truly comes to the forefront in this idea that Jesus was the friend of sinners.
Yes,
right?
The friend of sinners.
This is such a powerful and defining aspect of Jesus' ministry. It is his like remarkable willingness to engage with those who are marginalized and considered outsiders.
Yes. By the religious establishment of his time?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The study highlights this concept of missio Dei, which in essence refers to God's own mission in the world to reconcile humanity. So it's been God's character from the very beginning to seek out humanity that has become separated from him.
Right back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Ever since Adam and Eve in the garden. You know, God's initiative to bless all the families of the earth through Abraham in Genesis 12 is another key early example of this inherent missionary heart of God.
Right.
And this same attitude of actively seeking the lost is so clearly and powerfully embodied in Jesus' earthly ministry.
Right.
The study even quotes Paul saying in 2 Corinthians 5:19, God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself.
So good.
Yeah.
And Jesus didn't just preach about this inclusivity.
No.
He actively lived it out in his daily interactions. The powerful example of him attending a dinner party with Levi, a tax collector, and his socially dubious friends is so incredibly telling.
It is. Luke 5.2732 paints this vivid picture of Jesus, not just tolerating, but actively choosing to spend time in the company of those considered impure and beyond the pale by the prevailing religious standards of the day. Yet these individuals, they felt comfortable enough to be around him. And in that atmosphere of acceptance, they found a pathway
to connect with God.
Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible. And predictably, this drew sharp criticism.
Of course it did. You know?
The Pharisees.
And
the religious.
They couldn't stand it.
Their question, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners, really highlights this fundamental clash between their rigid worldview and Jesus's radically inclusive approach. It's black and white.
It is. It's night and day. You know?
And Jesus's response is so insightful and revealing of his mission.
It is,
He compares himself to a physician whose focus is naturally on those who are sick and in need of healing. That's right.
The study aptly calls this a therapeutic missional use of friendship.
That's a good way to put it.
It's so good. A deliberate and strategically chosen approach to reach out and minister to those who were outside the accepted religious boundaries.
Yes, he crossed boundaries. Intentionally.
So his friendships weren't just these casual social interactions.
No.
They were intentional acts of reaching out with a specific purpose in mind.
It's just with a purpose. That's right.
Right. And the core of the conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees wasn't just about these minor points of religious law. It was fundamentally about this Jesus's unwavering refusal to exclude anyone from the possibility of experiencing God's redeeming grace. It wasn't about like keeping the rules perfectly or anything like that.
It was about the heart. You know, in his eyes, these so-called sinners weren't to be shunned or condemned.
No, they were embraced.
They were precisely the people who were the primary focus. And of his attention. And his saving mission.
That's exactly right.
The parables in Luke chapter 15, the lost sheep, the lost coin, the prodigal son, beautifully and poignantly illustrate this deep concern and profound joy in finding and restoring those who are lost.
That's right.
Those parables are so incredibly powerful.
They're so good.
The Father's relentless. And the unconditional love. In the prodigal son story, the shepherd's determined an exhaustive search
for the one lost sheep.
For that one lost sheep. It really gives us a glimpse into the very heart of God.
It does.
It does. For those who are far away, and the study points out the somewhat unsettling open ending of the prodigal son parable, almost posing this direct challenge to the listeners.
It leaves us hanging.
It does.
Doesn't it? Like what happens next? You know?
What's fascinating here is that it compels the hearers then and now to confront their own potential for religious pride and their willingness to extend grace and acceptance to those who might seem undeserving in their own eyes.
Right. It challenges our own assumptions.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It does.
About who deserves God's love.
Right.
And who doesn't.
The study even makes this compelling argument that Jesus was ultimately crucified, at least in part, because of this relentless focus on the lost, which directly contradicted the deeply ingrained biases and exclusionary mindset
of the religious establishment.
His mission to seek out and restore the outcasts was fundamentally incompatible with their understanding of how God's favor operated.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to keep God's favor for a select group.
Yeah. And the one quote that so perfectly encapsulates the driving force behind everything he did, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost.
So good.
It's like the foundational principle.
Yeah, it is.
Right? That underpins his entire earthly ministry.
Yeah, it's his mission statement right there.
Now, this active thinking leads us directly into his calling to discipleship. Follow me.
Follow me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This wasn't just like a casual invitation to hang out.
No.
Was it?
It wasn't like, hey, come hang out with me. We'll have a good time. It'll be easy.
Right. Yeah.
No. The Gospels frequently record Jesus' invitation to follow me.
Right. Yeah. Expert.